That's my father's photo in your wallet. The words ripped through the restaurant and all eyes swiveled. Arthur Preston, billionaire recluse, looked like he'd been struck. Pale, reeling. They think she's crazy, think she's a gold digger. They have no idea. Sophia just wanted to earn her tips, pay her mom's bills. Now, staring at that faded image, rage coiled in her gut, a rage that knows no bounds. He killed him, didn't he? Years of lies, now exposed by a chance fumble, a dropped wallet, a single photograph. Her kindness, a mask, but beneath, vengeance sleeps. This isn't just about a job or money, it's about a life stolen, dignity denied, and they have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. That's my father's photo in your wallet. The words ripped through the restaurant and all eyes swiveled. Arthur Preston, billionaire recluse, looked like he'd been struck, pale, reeling. They think she's crazy, think she's a gold digger. They have no idea. Sophia just wanted to earn her tips, pay her mom's bills. Now staring at that faded image, rage coiled in her gut, a rage that knows no bounds. He killed him, didn't he? Years of lies now exposed by a chance fumble, a dropped wallet, a single photograph. Her kindness, a mask, but beneath, vengeance sleeps. This isn't just about a job or money, it's about a life stolen, dignity denied, and they have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. The Gilded Compass was a temple of hushed reverence, where fortunes were whispered across starched linen and the clinking of crystal was considered boisterous. Here, Sophia Novak navigated the tightrope of servitude, balancing plates and personalities with the practiced ease of a seasoned performer. At 20, she was both invisible and indispensable, a ghost flitting between tables, absorbing the anxieties and excesses of Manhattan's elite. Her days were a relentless grind. 8 hours on her feet, serving lobster bisque to demanding clients, followed by a frantic commute back to Queens and cramped evenings hunched over textbooks, chasing a degree in business administration. Every smile, every yes sir, was a calculated investment, a desperate attempt to outpace the growing stack of medical bills accumulating on her mother's bedside table. Helen's lungs were failing, and each breath was a costly battle. Then there was Arthur Preston. He was a fixture at table 12, a granite-faced enigma who materialized every Tuesday and Thursday precisely at 7 o'clock. His orders never varied. Filet mignon, medium rare, a 1982 Chateau Margaux, and San Pellegrino. He barely spoke. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, remained fixed on the manicured garden outside the window. Rumors swirled around him. CEO of Preston Global Enterprises, worth billions, a widower, a recluse. Sophia knew him only as a reliable source of generous tips. She treated him with polite deference, respecting the invisible barrier he erected around himself. This Thursday, however, felt different. A bone-chilling wind howled outside, and the restaurant hummed with a feverish energy. Sophia was bone-tired. Helen's cough had worsened, and the morning's doctor's visit had brought with it the familiar sting of financial dread. Her mind churned with calculations. Hours worked, tips earned, bills due. As she approached table 12 with Mr. Preston's check, her anxieties buzzed like trapped wasps. He reached inside his impeccably tailored suit for his wallet. It was old, made of worn dark brown leather. It looked soft and lived in, a stark contrast to the sleek accessories favored by the restaurant's younger clientele. As he extracted his credit card, his fingers seemed to betray him. A slight tremor, a fleeting distraction. The wallet slipped from his grasp and tumbled onto the plush carpet with a muffled thud. "Allow me, sir," Sophia said, her reflexes kicking in. She bent to retrieve it, her fingers brushing against the soft leather. The wallet had flopped open. Credit cards and a driver's license were on one side, a single faded photograph, tucked behind a cloudy plastic window, on the other. Two young men stood grinning, arms slung around each other's shoulders. The backdrop was a dilapidated storefront, its hand-painted sign proclaiming, "Innovate and Build." One was unmistakably a younger Arthur Preston, his hair dark and rebellious, his eyes blazing with an intensity Sophia had never witnessed. But it was the other man who stole her breath. His face was warm and open, a gap between his front teeth giving his smile a boyish charm. Laugh lines radiated from his eyes, testament to a life lived with joy. His hair was a wild, untamed mop, and he wore a paint-splattered t-shirt. Sophia's heart lurched. Her blood turned to ice. She knew that face. She knew that smile. It was the face in the only photograph her mother kept on her bedside table. The face of a man she barely remembered. A man who had died, supposedly of a heart attack, when she was 5, leaving them with nothing but debt and unanswered questions. The sounds of the restaurant faded, the clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the scent of truffle oil, all dissolved, leaving only the image in her mind. Her hand trembled as she reached out, touching the plastic. A choked gasp escaped her lips, louder than any sound she had ever dared to make in that hushed space. Mr. Preston glanced down, his expression one of mild annoyance. "Is there a problem, young lady?" His voice was a low, rumbling baritone. Sophia looked up, tears welling in her eyes. She pointed a shaking finger at the photograph. Her voice, when it came, was a raw, tearing cry that shattered the restaurant's carefully constructed decorum, turning every head in the room. "That's my father's photo in your wallet." The effect on Arthur Preston was immediate and terrifying. Medication began to remember things long suppressed by the trauma of poverty and grief. "A betrayal," Helen whispered one afternoon, her eyes cloudy with memory. "Daniel never told me the details. He was too proud, too ashamed. But he came home one day, a broken man. He said, 'He chose the money, Helen. He chose the empire over me.' He never mentioned the man's name again. It was like he was trying to excise him from our lives." "Did he ever talk about their company, innovate and build?" Sophia pressed gently. Helen shook her head. "No. After that day, he couldn't stand the sight of his old blueprints, his notebooks. He packed everything into a single wooden box, said it was a monument to his own stupidity. He stored it away somewhere. I think in the crawl space behind the closet in your room. He nailed the panel shut, said he never wanted to see it again." A jolt went through Sophia, a hidden box, a time capsule of her father's life before he was just dad. That night, she returned to their now empty Queen's apartment. It felt smaller, sadder than before. With a hammer and a crowbar, she pried open the painted-over panel at the back of her closet. Behind it, covered in 30 years of dust, was a small, heavy wooden chest. It wasn't locked. Meanwhile, Sophia's sudden appearance in Arthur Preston's life had not gone unnoticed. Arthur had one child, a son from his marriage to his late wife, Genevieve. Gregory Preston, 40 years old, was the executive vice president of Preston Global, a man who had lived his entire life in his father's formidable shadow. He was handsome, polished, and possessed all of his father's ambition, but none of his foundational grit, or as he saw it, his sentimental weakness. Gregory first learned of Sophia from a worried call from Mr. Dubois, the manager of the Gilded Compass, who was a distant cousin of Gregory's mother. The story of the fainting, the mysterious girl, and his father's subsequent uncharacteristic behavior set off alarm bells when he discovered his father had moved a complete stranger and her mother into the most expensive hospital wing in the city and set up a multi-million-dollar trust fund. His alarm turned to cold fury. He stormed into his father's penthouse office, a place he rarely entered without an appointment. "What is this I hear about some waitress?" Gregory demanded, foregoing any pleasantries. "You're throwing away millions on a girl who accosted you in a restaurant. Is this some sort of late-life crisis? Are you senile?" Arthur looked up from his desk, his face weary. "Her name is Sophia Novak, and she is none of your business, Gregory." "None of my business?" Gregory laughed a sharp, unpleasant sound. "Everything you do is my business. This company, this fortune, it is my birthright. I will not have you squander it on some grifter with a sob story. She is Daniel Novak's daughter." Arthur said the name, silencing Gregory for a moment. Gregory knew the name, of course. He'd heard whispers of the founding ghost over the years. Novak's daughter. Gregory's mind raced, processing the implications. A lost partner's heir appearing out of thin air. It was a threat, a direct threat to his inheritance and his control. So she's come back to claim a piece of the pie. Her father was too weak to hold on to. You can't possibly be falling for this. This is not about the company. It's a personal matter, a debt I am choosing to repay. Arthur set his tone final. There are no personal matters when it comes to our family, Father Gregory shot back. I'm going to look into this girl, and when I find the dirt, and trust me, I will find it. I expect you to cut her off for your own good, for the good of the company. He left without waiting for a reply. Gregory immediately contacted the head of his corporate security, a former Mossad agent named Callan, whose methods were discreet, thorough, and utterly ruthless. I want to know everything about a woman named Sophia Novak, and her mother Helen. Gregory instructed him over the phone. And I mean everything. Every job she's had, every dollar she's owed, every friend she's spoken to. I want to know about her father, Daniel Novak. Dig deep, find the skeleton, find the leverage. I want to crush this before it becomes a problem. While the shark began to circle, Sophia sat on the floor of her dusty closet, her hands trembling as she lifted the lid of the wooden box. It smelled of old paper and faded ink. Inside, neatly stacked, were notebooks filled with elegant schematics, business plans, and personal notes. There were old photographs of her father and a young Arthur looking happy and full of hope. And at the very bottom, beneath a bundle of letters tied with twine, was a single leather-bound journal. She opened it to the first page. The handwriting was her father's, a strong, clear script. The first entry was dated almost 35 years ago. The last entry was from the week he walked out of Arthur Preston's life forever. With a deep breath, Sophia began to read, unaware that she was about to uncover a truth far darker and more painful than a simple disagreement between friends. She was about to read the story of a great betrayal written by the man who had lived it. The world outside Sophia's apartment faded away as she lost herself in her father's journal. The entries started with buoyant optimism, chronicling the birth of Innovate and Build. October 12th. Art and I signed the lease today. The place is a dump, but it's our dump. He's got the killer instinct for business, and I've got the designs that will change the industry. He called us the mind and the heart. Together, we're going to build an empire on a foundation of integrity and innovation. Sophia read for hours a portrait of her father emerging that was so much more vibrant than the tortured, sad man of her faint childhood memories. He was brilliant, passionate, and funny. He wrote of Arthur with deep affection and admiration. They were inseparable, two halves of a whole. Then about 5 years and the tone began to shift. The entries became shorter, tinged with anxiety. March 4th. Had another argument with Art tonight. He's been in talks with Titan Consolidated. They're corporate vultures. He calls it a strategic merger. I call it selling our soul. He doesn't see it, the numbers, the market share. That's all he sees anymore. He's starting to look at people like they're assets or liabilities, not people. April 21st. Art went behind my back. He used his majority share to leverage a preliminary deal with Titan. He claims it's for our own good to protect us from being crushed. But the terms, they want us to use cheaper substandard materials to cut costs. They want us to lay off half of our original workshop crew, the men who built this place with us. This isn't what we stood for. Sophia's blood ran cold as she read on. This was no simple disagreement. This was a fundamental clash of values. Arthur's version of the story was a sanitized, self-serving lie. The final entries were filled with a desperate, heartbreaking anguish. May 15th, I confronted him today with the final terms. I showed him the clauses about the environmental shortcuts, the pension fund diversions for the workers. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me, his eyes like chips of ice, and said, "This is the price of greatness, Danny. You're too sentimental to understand." He said my sentimentality was a liability he could no longer afford. He offered me a buyout, a pittance, a fraction of what my half is worth, structured in a way that I would have to sign an ironclad non-compete in a non-disclosure agreement. It was hush money. May 18th, he held the final vote today. He had secured the board. I was the lone dissenting voice. My own company, the one I poured my lifeblood into, voted to cannibalize itself. After the meeting, he had the gall to tell me he was doing this for us. I told him there was no us anymore. There was only him. The final entry was the most damning. It was written the day after Daniel Novak walked out of the company for the last time. May 20th. I am a ghost. Art's lawyers have systematically pushed me out. They found loopholes in our original partnership agreement, the one we wrote ourselves on a napkin in a diner. My shares are worthless unless I accept his insulting offer. If I fight it, they will bury me in legal fees I cannot afford. He knew that. He planned this. This wasn't a hostile takeover of another company. It was a hostile takeover of my life. He didn't just push me out. He engineered my destruction to clear his path. He erased me. I have nothing left but my pride. I will not take his blood money. I will not let him own my silence. I will disappear. I will start again. Helen and I will survive. I will never let his name be spoken in my house again. Let him have his cold, empty kingdom. Sophia closed the journal, her hands shaking with rage. Tears streamed down her face, not of sadness, but of pure, incandescent fury. Her father hadn't just vanished. He had been financially and professionally executed by the man he called his brother. Arthur Preston hadn't lost a friend. He had meticulously destroyed one. The generosity, the private hospital room, the trust fund. It wasn't a debt being repaid. It was a second attempt at buying her family's silence. The story he had told her in his penthouse was a disgusting, calculated lie designed to paint him as a tragic figure, not the ruthless predator he truly was. Every hardship in her life, every night, her mother went without medicine. Every opportunity, Sophia missed every moment of struggle. She could now trace it all back to the cold corporate machinations of one man, Arthur Preston. She carefully placed the journal in her bag. The initial shock was hardening into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. She was no longer the timid, grateful waitress. She was Daniel Novak's daughter, and she would not be silenced. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Walter Finch. Miss Novak, Arthur has been asking after you. He would like to meet again tomorrow to discuss the long-term plans for your education and your mother's care. Please let me know what time is convenient. Sophia's fingers flew across the screen, her reply sharp and immediate. 10 a.m. His office. Tell him to be ready to tell the truth this time. As she sent the message, she felt a shift inside her. The fear was gone, replaced by a burning sense of purpose. She wasn't going to that meeting to ask for answers. She was going to deliver a judgment. At the same time, across town, in a sleek, modern office, Gregory Preston was reviewing the preliminary report from his investigator, Kalin. It was mostly biographical data, financial records showing decades of struggle medical histories. Nothing scandalous, nothing he could use. This is useless, Gregory snapped into his phone. I need dirt, not a biography. Patience, Mr. Preston, Kalin's calm voice replied from the other end. We are still in the early stages. However, one anomaly has appeared. Daniel Novak's official cause of death is listed as a massive coronary event standard. But in the year leading up to his death, he made several inquiries to the state's Environmental Protection Agency. So he was probably a tree hugger, Gregory said dismissively. The inquiries were not general. Kalin continued, his voice steady. They were specifically about chemical waste disposal protocols for factories in the late 1980s, and the primary factory site he was inquiring about was an early acquisition of Preston Global. Gregory sat up straighter, a predatory gleam in his eye. This was something. This was more than a sob story. This was a loose end. Keep digging, Gregory ordered. I want to know what he was looking for. I want to know everything. Two children armed with two different versions of the past were now on a collision course, heading straight for the heart of Arthur Preston's empire of lies. And the fallout would be catastrophic. The next morning, Sophia walked into the Preston Global Enterprises headquarters, not as an intimidated girl, but as an avenging angel. She bypassed the reception desk and the offered visitor's pass, her gaze so intense and commanding that the security guards simply stepped aside. She strode into the private elevator and rode it to the top floor. In silence, her father's journal, a heavy, righteous weight in her bag. When the doors opened, Walter Finch was waiting, his expression as placid as ever. Miss Novak, he's in the main conference room. She walked past him without a word. The conference room was another exercise in obscene wealth, dominated by a single massive mahogany table that could seat 40. Arthur Preston sat at the head of it, alone, a small coffee cup before him. He looked up and offered a faint, tired smile. Sophia, I'm glad you came. I've had my team draw up some prospectuses for universities' endowments. Sophia cut him off by dropping the leather-bound journal onto the gleaming table. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. I'm not here to talk about my future, Mr. Preston, she said, her voice low and vibrating with contained fury. I'm here to talk about my father's past, the real one. Arthur stared at the journal, his face paling as he seemed to recognize it. What is that? It's my father's voice, Sophia said, her voice rising. A voice you tried to silence 30 years ago. I've read it all, Arthur. The disagreement wasn't about being sentimental. It was about you wanting to use substandard materials. It was about you planning to poison the earth for profit. It was about you wanting to fire the very men who built the company with us. She opened the journal and slammed her hand down on a page. He writes about your buyout offer. A pittance. Hush money. He talks about how you used the partnership agreement you wrote on a napkin to legally crucify him. He didn't just walk away. You pushed him off a cliff. Arthur flinched as if struck. He couldn't meet her gaze. He stared at the journal as if it were a coiled snake. You didn't lose a friend, Sophia continued, her voice breaking with the force of her emotion. You executed him. You erased him from your history and left him to die in poverty. All so you could build this monument to your own greed. It wasn't like that, Arthur whispered, his voice raspy. It was business. It was a different time. To survive, to build something that lasts, you have to make hard choices, sacrifices. He wasn't a sacrifice, Sophia screamed, tears of rage finally spilling over. He was a human being. He was your brother, and you fed him to the wolves to save yourself. All these years you kept his picture in your wallet. Why? As a trophy, a reminder of your first kill. No, Arthur roared, surging to his feet. The sudden explosion of sound was shocking. As a reminder of the man I was before I became. This a reminder of the soul I sold to get to the top. Do you think I've been happy? Do you think I enjoyed a single day in this gilded cage? My wife Genevieve, she died in this penthouse surrounded by masterpieces, and she was the loneliest woman in the world because her husband was a ghost who only cared about the next deal. I lost him, and in losing him, I lost myself. His confession hung in the air raw and bleeding. For a moment, Sophia saw a flicker of the man in the photograph, a man capable of regret of pain. But it wasn't enough. Regret doesn't pay my mother's medical bills for the last 20 years, she said, her voice cold again. Regret didn't keep my father alive. He tried to start over, didn't he, after you crushed him? Arthur's face crumpled. This was the question he had been dreading. He sank back into his chair, a broken man. Yes, he admitted, his voice barely audible. What happened? He tried to launch a small consulting firm 2 years after he left. He was brilliant. He would have succeeded. Arthur confessed, shame coloring his words. I couldn't risk it. He knew too much about our early dealings. The Titan merger. I was afraid he'd expose me. So I made some calls. I made sure he couldn't get funding. I blacklisted him. I told people he was unstable, unreliable. I destroyed his reputation. Sophia felt the last ounce of air leave her body. This was the final, most monstrous betrayal. He hadn't just pushed her father out. He had hunted him. He had stalked him and ensured he would never rise again. You sabotaged him, she whispered in horror. You actively made sure he would fail. I was scared, Arthur choked out. I had everything to lose. He had nothing, Sophia replied, her voice dead. And you took that too. The heavy silence that followed was shattered by the conference room doors swinging open. Gregory Preston strode in a smug, triumphant look on his face. He held a tablet in his hand. Well, well, Gregory said, his voice dripping with condescension. Family time. It's even more pathetic than I imagined. The great Arthur Preston crying over a ghost from 30 years ago. Gregory, get out, Arthur ordered weakly. Oh, I don't think so, Father Gregory said, circling the table until he stood beside Sophia. You see, I've been reading a ghost story of my own, and it has a much more interesting ending. He turned to Sophia. You think your father was just a victim of a bad business deal? That's the sanitized version. I did some digging. In the year before he died, your father wasn't trying to build a new company. He was building a case. Sophia and Arthur both stared at him confused. A case? Sophia asked. He was investigating Preston Global. Gregory announced, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight, specifically one of our old chemical plants upstate, the one acquired in the Titan merger. He suspected the company was illegally dumping toxic waste into the local water table, and he was gathering evidence to take to the EPA. He was about to blow the whistle on a scandal that would have destroyed this company and you, Father, before he conveniently had a heart attack at the age of 45. He let the implication hang in the air, thick and poisonous. He wasn't looking at Sophia. He was looking directly at his father, a cold, calculating look in his eyes. He wasn't exposing a crime out of a sense of justice. He was brandishing a weapon. Arthur Preston looked from his son's accusatory face to Sophia's horrified one. The blood drained from his face for the second time in a week. The journal, the business betrayal, that was one thing. This was another. This was darker, a crime that went beyond money and into the realm of life and death. The cracks in the throne were no longer just cracks. The entire edifice of his life was beginning to crumble into dust. The poisonous accusation filled the room. Gregory's motive was sickeningly clear. This wasn't about justice for Daniel Novak, but about using a potential crime as a weapon to seize control from his father. Your father was a threat, Gregory said to Sophia, his eyes fixed on Arthur. And this family has always known how to neutralize threats. In that moment, Arthur Preston saw the reflection of his own life of ruthless ambition in his son's cold eyes. He saw the monster he had created. A profound, terrible clarity washed over him, and the broken old man was replaced by someone else, a man finally ready to pay for his sins. I didn't order his death, Arthur stated, his voice suddenly strong, but I caused it. He turned to Sophia, his gaze unwavering and filled with a lifetime of shame. I knew Daniel was investigating the chemical plant. I sent men to intimidate him, to buy his silence. The day after they threatened him, his heart gave out. The stress, the fear, I put that on him. I may not have held the weapon, but my actions killed him just the same. Gregory scoffed. A touching confession. It's still my word against yours. No, Arthur said, a final, unbreakable finality in his tone. He looked past his son to Walter Finch, who stood by the door. Walter, call the district attorney's office. Tell them I am on my way down to give a full confession about the merger, the sabotage, the illegal dumping, and my role in the death of Daniel Novak. It's all coming out. You're insane. You'll destroy everything. Gregory shrieked, his smug composure shattering. The kingdom is already rotten, Arthur replied, his voice heavy with grief. I'm just burning it down to let the light in. The fallout was swift and catastrophic. Arthur Preston's confession led to his arrest and a massive federal investigation into Preston Global. The company was hit with crippling fines, and Gregory, implicated in the cover-up and his own blackmail attempts, faced his own legal ruin. Before his sentencing in a final act of penance, Arthur Preston used his vast personal fortune to create the Daniel Novak Foundation for Ethical Innovation. He then placed the controlling interest of his restructured, humbled company into a trust. As chairperson, he named the one person he knew would honor its new ethical charter, Sophia Novak. A year later, Sophia stood at the head of a boardroom, not as a victim, but as a leader. The company was smaller, but it was honest, a testament to her father's true vision. She never visited Arthur in prison. Forgiveness was a grace she could not grant. But she had found something more profound than vengeance. By taking the ashes of Arthur Preston's corrupt empire and building a legacy of integrity, she had finally brought justice to her father's name and peace to his memory. The ghost in the wallet was finally home. Sophia's story is a powerful reminder that the past is never truly buried. A single photograph in a worn leather wallet was enough to unravel a 30-year-old lie, toppling a billion-dollar empire and exposing the terrible price of unchecked ambition. It's a story about the ghosts we carry and the debts that always come due. It shows us that true strength isn't found in wealth or power, but in the courage to face the truth, no matter how devastating. What started as a moment of shock in a restaurant became a crusade for justice, forever changing the lives of everyone involved. What would you have done in Sophia's shoes? Would you have taken the initial money and walked away? Or would you have fought for the truth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this incredible story of betrayal and redemption moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who loves real-life drama, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories you won't find anywhere else. Thank you for listening.